Hey guys, Fox here, and today is the day the video I've been teasing for a while is finally coming out, the top 10 best original USFL quarterbacks. This video, unlike the coaches video I did last year, this is purely ranking quarterbacks from the original USFL only on what they did in the USFL. It does not matter if you went on to be an NFL Hall of Famer. It doesn't matter if you did literally nothing outside the USFL. Only what you did in this league matters, and it doesn't matter when you played. It's just who are the best quarterbacks from this league based on things like, achievements, awards, stats, career stats, and leader stats. So without further ado, coming in at number 10, Brian Sipe of the New Jersey Generals and Jacksonville Bulls. Sipe comes in down at number 10, mainly because he only did play 1 year. It's just that his 1 year is great. Now, he did technically play in two, but with the Bulls, he got hurt very, very early on in the year, so it affected his stats. So almost his entirety of stats are from his first season with the Generals, though if he did play a full season with the Bulls, he was on pace to have a great one. All in all, he finished just inside the top 20 in passing attempts, completion, yards, and TDs. But he finished with the sixth best passer rating. All this is minimum 200 attempts. And he was all the way down at 28 in interceptions, which being almost 10 spots lower than your attempts and yards is pretty good. And he was seventh in completion percentage. He was a very efficient passer, almost 60 completion percentage, and then 3,225 yards. And he did have slightly more TDs to interceptions, which we'll see is a big deal. On the ground, he was just 60 yards with two TDs isn't anything to be write home about. But the one big issue as well is the fact that really he didn't have any accolades or leadership or leaders in stats. He had an 0-1 record in the playoffs, but he did lose to the Stars. Granted, they got blown out. But losing to the Stars in '84, I mean, you lost to the eventual champions. Not much bad to say there. Team was mainly, talked about Herschel Walker, but '84 was like Walker's weakest season of the three. So, Brian Sipe coming in at number 10. I feel like that's pretty fair. Coming in at number 9 is going to be Walter Lewis. Walter Lewis of the Showboats from 84 to 85 was one of their two quarterbacks. I'll get to that in a second. So, as for Lewis, his time with the Showboats, he was actually a very, very solid quarterback. In fact, if he was the full-time starter and he was able to keep up the production he had, he honestly might have gone down as a top 5. In those 2 years, he naturally was just inside the top 20 in attempts, completions, and passing yards, though a little bit higher than Sipe. But his completion percentage did taper off compared to Sipe going all the way down to 17. But his passing TDs was 11th and his interceptions was 29th. So despite throwing more times than Sipe, he ended up having less interceptions. And he was 4th in passer rating across any player with a minimum of 200 attempts, which is incredible. His 31 TDs to 15 interceptions is one of the top in the entire league. And when you also add his 9 rushing touchdowns, make it 40 to 15, it makes it even better. And rushing-wise, he was probably the best mobile quarterback across either year. I know some of you might say, Steve Young or Doug Flutie, but they were, very young and early in their careers. Walter Lewis was incredible. 9.14 yards per attempt for 1,100 yards is insane. So he played 2 years, but the big issue is that he had this split time with Mike Kelly. Kelly, just foreshadowing, doesn't even make this list. It's one of those things that it's just, in hindsight, it's just that one guy was way statistically better, and that was Lewis. But you're talking about the 80s. The idea of a black quarterback was not as, normal as it is today, where, today it's a quarterback. Back then, it's, oh my God, it's a black quarterback. So he had to deal with that problem, and that's probably a huge reason to why he ended up not, becoming the real starter there. Because even when they made the playoffs in '85, he was the backup. That's despite the fact that Lewis, in 184 passing attempts, was the best passer in the whole league. He had the best passer rating in the entire league. Now, he didn't qualify for the title because he didn't have 200 attempts, but among the attempts that he did have, he was the best. And considering he also rushed for over 500 yards both seasons, it's pretty insane to think that he wasn't the full-time starter, especially when you consider the fact that it's not like this team was, loaded in receiver talent. Greg Moser had the most receiving yards in a single season. And during his time with the Jim Kelly Gamblers, he wasn't even, an insane player. And Tim Spencer was there in '85, but it really is a shame. Lewis should have been much more with this team. It's a shame he didn't get a full-time shot. He could have gone down as one of the best, but number 9 is nothing to scoff at. Then coming in at number 8 is going to be Johnny Walton. Johnny Walton is one of those stories that the USFL you look at, you're like, wow, that's incredible. So Johnny had been basically out of the game for years, and Dick Curry, who had been with Walton in the past, decided to bring him out of retirement to come play for the Breakers. And in those 2 years, he was actually really damn good. Fifth in passing attempts, sixth in completions, fifth in yards, eighth in TDs, and tied fifth in interceptions. The interceptions is really the only bad stat. Those completion percentage being all the way at 20th is pretty bad too. Tied 14th in pass rating isn't insane. But the fact is, when you look at this team had really only like Dan Ross in their team was the only like really good player. Aside from Marcus Dupree, who did have to deal with injuries at some points. But receiving wise, it's not like he had this plethora of receivers on his team. And the fact is that he hadn't played in years. And when you consider what he overall did too, in '83 he was the leader in passes attempted. I feel like Abe is a spot he kind of deserves. He got to be a full-time starter, and honestly, I wouldn't be upset if you put Lewis above him. This is probably the most interchangeable spot is 8 and 9. I went with Walton because he did get to play 2 full years as a starter and we got to see exactly what he could do. And when you consider the fact that he had been out of the game for so long, definitely is an incredible story. Number 8 goes to Walton. Now, coming in at number 7 is going to be Fred Bessina. Fred was he was a pretty good quarterback who just had one huge issue end up happening. He only got to start 2 years, even though he's one of the few quarterbacks who got restart. Coming in at number 7 is going to be Fred Bessina. So, as for Fred, he was the quarterback of the Invaders for 3 years, or really only 2. Look, even though he technically was one of the very, very, very few quarterbacks who stayed on his team for all 3 years of the league's history, in '85 there was the whole merger with the Panthers, and he got put on the bench for Bobby Hebert. So he really was only the starter in 2 years, and his stats across mainly just 2 years include him being 6th in attempts, 5th in completions, really respectable 3rd in completion percentage, 6th in yards, 7th in TDs, and tied 10th in interceptions, and then 8th in pass rating. Overall, very solid stats. He also had 6 TDs on the ground with 328 yards. So he's one of those guys that you could, kind of use the joke of sneaky athletic, 320 yards across 2 years of the 4 average is nothing insane, but it's decent. Shows he could run. And the fact is that him being 3rd in completion percentage when he actually played 2 years is also a really solid stat. And his being top 10 in pass rating is pretty good. So, what is the other parts about him? Well, the issues is the postseason. He only went to the playoffs one time. And though they did lose to the eventual champion Panthers in '83, the only other thing he really can say is that in '83 he was the passing yards leader and completion percentage leader. And a huge reason for that is the fact that he did have a couple really solid players on his team. Raymond Chester and Arthur Whittington were both pretty solid players that he had at disposal. Because the big issue is that a lot of the really good weapons the Invaders would end up getting, like the Anthony Carters of the world, only came because of the merger, which was when he was on the bench. So if he had been able to be the starter in '85, he could have definitely been much higher, but top 7, pretty solid in its own right. Coming in at number 6 is going to be John Reeves of the Tampa Bay Bandits. He is one of the only other quarterbacks to play for all 3 years on one team. But yes, I know this might be a shock that he's this low on the list, but he is deserving of this spot. Look, overall stat-wise, quantitative, yes, 3rd in passing attempts, 3rd in completions, 3rd in yards, 4th in TDs, and 1st in interceptions are all up there, though you don't want to be 1st in interceptions. The issue comes in the fact that he is 10th in passer rating. That's not terrible, but it's just not great. And then 16th in completion percentage, same thing. And rushing-wise, he was actually a bad rusher. In fact, he was technically worse for his team than good. Negative 10 yards on 5 yards per attempt, or 0.5 yards per attempt is pretty bad. So, John Reeves, though, he got to be the quarterback of Bandit Ball for all 3 years with Steve Spurrier as the head coach. But the issue is that he did only go 0-2 in the playoffs. And it's not like, he lost to, the eventual champions. Though he did lead his team to a winning record in all 3 seasons, as if you don't remember, the '83 season had, multiple 11-win teams miss the playoffs. And then in '85, he was the leader in interceptions, which is bad. And his team wasn't, this god squad, but he did have, a future Cowboy great Nate Newton on the team. Gary Anderson was a really solid running back who ended up finishing 4th in rushing yards when he was on this team. Then Danny Buggs in his first season with the Bandits was a really great receiver. He only played there 1 year. So 6, I feel like, is where he belongs just because a lot of the stats he leads are bad stats, and he didn't do enough in the playoffs for me to justify him putting him higher. I think 6 is a solid spot for him. That's where I'm putting him. Then at number 5, we're going to have Greg Landry. Landry played for the Blitz and the Wranglers, so the whole merger or the whole franchise swap thing. And he would end up retiring after that 84 season. He went off kind of on top. He made it to a title game. So where he finishes is 10th in attempts, 9th in completions, 4th in percentage, 10th in yards, 6th in TDs, 17th in interceptions, and 5th in pass rating. Essentially, he is one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league. Him, Lewis, and Fushino are really like the 3 guys you look at, and Stout are like the 4 guys you look at and say they were the most efficient passers really much in the whole league. Considering the fact that he is so high in attempts and all that, being top 10, yet he's all the way down at 17 interceptions, and he's top 6 in passing TDs is incredible. 5,900 yards, above a 60 completion percentage, 42 TDs to 24 interceptions, and he did also have 2 on the ground. Pretty solid overall. And the biggest reason that I put him above Reeves is because he is one of only 3 quarterbacks to actually make it to a title game. Because of the fact that there are only 6 spots since the three title games, so 2 teams make it 6 spots, and 2 of the quarterbacks end up taking 5 of those spots. He's the odd man out. The only issue is in that playoff run, he was really bad. If you go back and look at all the stats and how he played, it was mainly thanks to Tim Spencer and Kevin Long that they got to that title game. And considering the fact that was the only title game that was a blowout, kind of not surprising. Though his other losses, were to the Stars. He did lose to the Stars in the first year, and that loss was in OT to the team that eventually lost to the title game. And then in '84, they lost the title game to the Stars. But a 2-2 record in the playoffs and everything he did, I feel like number 5 is a very solid spot for Landry. So that's where I'm going to leave him. Now, coming in at number 4 is going to be Cliff Stout. This was the single easiest position on the list for any player to get. I mean, if you know anything about the OG USFL, you already knew clicking on this video who the top 3 quarterbacks were. It's just in what order. But number 4 is just obviously Stout. I don't really see an argument for anyone else to be above him or below him, aside from the 3 guys above him and then everyone else below him. Because in the 2 years he was a starter in '84 and '85, he finished top 10 in attempts, completions, and yards. He finished literally 10th in completion percentage, 5th in TDs, to tied 13th in interceptions, and 2nd in pass rating. That's right, he was the 2nd leader in efficiency. And on the ground, 877 yards on a 5.93 yards per attempt and 14 TDs makes him one of the best mobile quarterbacks in the league as well. It puts him at 74 touchdowns to 26 interceptions. That's almost 3-1, which when you look at every other quarterback in this league is insane. That's like a modern day statistic almost, which is incredible. And the fact is that when you look at what he did across those 2 years, 2-2 record in the playoffs. The only 2 losses he had were both to the Stars when the Stars would go on to be champions. So you could make a case they were the 2nd best team in the league if you, use the, who they lost to argument. Then Stout, in his 2 years as starter, rested 1 game. So he played in all but 1 game those 2 years, went 27-8. The team as a whole went 27-9. Even if you use that 27-9 record, across those 2 years, that was the best record in the entire league. And he was 2nd in passer rating in both '84 and '85. So the 2 years he played, he was almost the most efficient passer. And if you do both seasons, you can make the case he was. His team had the best record across both seasons, and they only lost to the team that would go on to be the champion both years. I mean, come on. He just so clearly deserves this spot. Now, look, he did have a couple really solid players. Leon Perry was a great fullback for them. Joe Cribbs was an outstanding running back. And then Jim Smith was arguably the best receiver in the USFL, purely based on the stats he put up, that like 1,600-yard season and all that. But when I look at this team, you look at it and you just say, man, Cliff Stout was incredible. The stats he put up are just insane. He definitely deserves number 4. It's just that the 3 guys above him, they're above him for a reason. But number 4, congrats to Stout. He definitely deserves the spot. Coming in at number 3 is going to be Jim Kelly. Now, this is one that a lot of you might say is a hot take. But yes, I'm putting the man of the gamblers at number 3. He played 2 years in the league, '84 and '85. He finished 4th in attempts, completions, yards, 1st in completion percentage and TDs, and passer rating at 98.1, and 3rd in interceptions. He overall had a 89-45 TD interception ratio when you include his rushing TDs, and he did have 660 rushing yards. but I am putting him at number 3. Now, the main reason is just because of the postseason and just because I feel like the other two guys are a bit better in terms of just USFL, which again is a hot take, but he went 0-2 in the playoffs. He did lose those games by a combined score of 3 points. But one of them, while he did play really good, the other one, he did throw more interceptions than TDs, and it's a big reason they lost. And overall, in 84, he was debatably the best quarterback. We'll get to the other guy who was debatably the best quarterback. He finished as the all-league team and MVP across, the USFL award, but the Sporting News only gave him Rookie of the Year. In 85, he was the all-league and TSN all-star team. So that year, he was considered the best quarterback in the league. In 84, he was the leader in yards, TDs, attempts, completions, and interceptions. In 85, he was the leader in yards, TDs, attempts, completions, and passer rating. So the one thing with him is that his interception total was pretty high, but so was his touchdowns. And of course, the big question is what would he have been able to do if he'd been able to play all 3 seasons. But it's also important to note that he did have a pretty good supporting cast. A lot of the guys around him would go on to be Pro Bowlers in the NFL, with his weakest player really being like Todd Fowler, the running back. When you had Ricky Sanders, Clarence Verdon, Gerald McNeil, and Richard Johnson all on your team, you had a pretty good receiving core, all things considered. So while yes, he was a huge reason the team had success, they also had a overall good receiving core that were also pretty good in the NFL. So I don't feel like he deserves to be top 2, but I feel like 3rd is a very good spot for him. I wouldn't be upset if you put him 2 or even 1. I just personally think he's the worst of the 3 all-time great USFL quarterbacks. Coming in at number 2 is going to be Chuck Fushina, the last of the quarterbacks to talk about that played on their team for all 3 seasons, playing from 83 to 85 on the Stars. Look, I think a lot of people probably look back at him and think of him as just being, like a Phil Simms, like he was just a good quarterback. Nah, he was legitimately a great quarterback on this league. 2nd in attempts, 1st in completions, 2nd in completion percentage, 2nd in passing yards, 3rd in passing touchdowns, 9th in interceptions, and 3rd in pass rating. 9th in interceptions, when you're literally the 2nd highest thrower of the football, is insane. 89.2 rating is great. And he was also a decent runner, 774 yards across the 3 seasons. That's, over 220 yards per season. So he was a pretty good runner. 4 TDs on the ground makes a 70 to 33 touchdown interception ratio. Not the best we've seen, but one of the best. And 61 completion percentage is pretty incredible, especially when you consider who his receivers were and all that. Now, when you look at what his accolades are, he was the champion in 84 and 85. He went to all 3 title games. He was the 84 championship game MVP. His record in the playoffs is 7-1. He lost the 83 championship by only 2 points. In 84, he was who the Sporting News viewed as the best quarterback, giving him their All-Star nod and MVP. And he was the passer rating leader that year and the completion percentage leader that year. So he was incredible. And when you consider the fact that receiving-wise, his best receivers like Scott Fitzke across all 3 years, that's pretty incredible. Now, he did have who many people would consider the greatest USFL player ever in Kelvin Bryant as his running back. But pure receiver-wise, he didn't have this star-studded group of receivers or even that number 1 that's incredible. Now, he did admittedly have a really solid offensive line. Irv Eatman, Bart Oates, Chuck Comiskey, really solid group up front. But when you look at his receiving core, it's nothing really to write home about. Nothing about his receiving core makes you go, oh my God, he's got this, loaded group like Kelly does. And considering the fact that he also won 2 title games, I feel like he deserves the number 2 spot. So that's where I'm putting Fushina. Coming in at number 1 is going to be Bobby Hebert. Hebert was the quarterback of the Panthers from 83 to 84 and the Invaders in 85. And he finishes really well in most of the stats. 1st in attempts, 2nd in completions, 1st in yards, 2nd in TDs, though 2nd in interceptions and 7th in pass rating. He finished tied 21st completion percentage as well, which isn't great. But his overall career statistics are just incredible. Rushing-wise, not so much, but he did have 5 rushing touchdowns. But 81 passing TDs and then his 11,000 passing yards. 11,000 is the most in the league's history. 55 completion percentage nearly isn't the best, but I think it's overall just decent enough to put where he is. But let's be real, the real reason is his overall accolades. In 1983, he was the USFL champion and championship game MVP winner. He's the only guy to beat the Stars in the playoffs. He actually made it to the postseason all 3 seasons, one of the only guys to do that. He made it to the 85 title game against the Stars, and in his 4-2 record in the playoffs is naturally the second best in the entire league. He lost in 84 due to his team missing 2 separate field goals in what would go down as the longest pro football game ever as a triple OT playoff game. So if it wasn't for some missed kicks, he could have realistically gotten to all 3 title games as well. He lost the 85 championship game by only 4 points as well. So when he lost, just like how Kelly's games were close, so were Hebert's. And then in 83, he was the best quarterback by far. He was the Sporting News and All-League team. He was the outstanding QB, the Player of the Year winner, and he was the passer rating leader and the passing TD leader. The only guy who ended up winning more awards than him was Calvin Bryant, who took home MVP. But Hebert was incredible. So now, why do I put him above Fuchina and Kelly? Well, it's a tough one, but I look at Kelly and I say, well, Hebert just was so much more of a winner. And even though he did also have solid receivers, like Derek Holloway and Anthony Bentley, or Albert Bentley, and Anthony Carter, and then Arthur Whittington, it's not like his team was as good as Jim Kelly's team. Like, Anthony Carter was incredible, but aside from him, it's not like they're, multi-time Pro Bowlers like Jim Kelly had. And then against Fuchina, it's more or less the fact that I just feel like Hebert was more of a quantitative guy. And the fact that even though his receivers were better than Fuchina's, it's not like his offensive line was this God squad, and it's not like he had Calvin Bryant up there. And when you also consider the defensive side of the ball, the Stars were just so loaded. Like, yes, the Panthers had a couple of really great players, but the Stars' defense featured, a future Hall of Famer in Sam Mills and a few other really solid players. So I just slightly give the edge to Hebert. So this is my list of the top 10 USFL quarterbacks. Let me know down in the comments what you agree, disagree with, what your list is and all that. If you like this content, let me know so I can do more of these OG rankings. This has been Sam Fox. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell, and as always, have a great night.